Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Effortless IT Operations for the Modern Organization, sponsored by Automox. My name is Carol Auth of SANS, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Dave Shackleford, SANS Analyst, Jessica Onorati, Automox Team Lead of Corporate Security, and David Van Heerden, Automox Manager of IT Ops. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the Q&A window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to our presenters.
Great. Hey, thanks, Carol, and thanks everybody for joining. This is Dave Shackleford. I'm excited to be joined by Jessica and David here as well, but I'll get things rolling. And so let me quickly sort of jump into the meat of this and give my perspective. One of the things we do at SANS is take a look at various types of security solutions and products and services. And I was really excited about this one for a whole lot of reasons because number one, my background is in things like configuration management and sort of that system level infrastructure control sort of scenario. And one of those things that I think was really ripe, categorically, I think was really ripe for some innovation. Truthfully, I think that the days of the on-premises server infrastructure, I mean, it's not dead, but certainly, we've seen some significant shifts. We've got stuff in the cloud, we've got stuff on premises still. We have things all over the place, but sort of setting up the internal, sort of systems management infrastructure. I think again, it was really an opportunity for some changes in that space, and so I was really pumped to get a chance to check out the Automox solution because that was the starting point, right? So this is one of those great opportunities where, as a SANS analyst, I get the opportunity to say that I was actually suitably impressed coming into this within probably, I don't know, a week or two of the team, giving me an account in Automox and sort of setting me up because I didn't realize it was vastly more than that. So pleasantly surprised, thinking, cool, I've got like systems management, like next generation systems management kind of stuff, which is incredibly important, but it went a lot beyond that. So what I found is that this sort of steps beyond systems management and really encompasses many more aspects of vulnerability management than I had realized. And so again, kind of cool because this is definitely a hit or miss area. A lot of organizations really struggle operationally, keeping things patched. I mean, as somebody that does penetration testing as a consultant, it's a sad day when you come across stuff that just is woefully misconfigured or missing patches that just have no business, being absent within people's environments. But it's very common still, especially for large, sort of sprawling infrastructures. People miss things. It happens all the time. You know it. I know it. We know it. And so coming across not only a solution that can handle that, right, can handle all the patching, can handle configuration elements of systems, but also provide vulnerability intelligence, also provide event management and insight, and even things like investigative capabilities. There's automation tied into the mix here. So many things to like. So again, pretty excited to be able to tell everybody about my experience doing the review of the Automox solution. So it's a cloud-based IT ops platform, which again, I think is the way to go here. Trying to create wholly on-premises based solutions just doesn't make that much sense to me anymore. And so, number one, just the modality by which this gets done makes sense right out of the gate. But it's a central way to, again, control systems and manage those across an enormous range of different supported solutions. And I think the entire setup time to get this whole thing going was a few minutes. And that's not an exaggeration. So I tend to have, if any of you have ever heard any of my review discussions before, I have a very, sort of significant weighting on ease of use. Like, I think it's a big deal. I hate solutions that are clunky, and don't have any thought into UI design, because the more readily, intuitive these types of solutions are, the ops teams and the security teams of the world can jump right in and get started, and don't have to hunt and peck and figure out where they're going and what they're looking at and where different sort of menu items are. And again, not an exaggeration, I had systems under management in the console within minutes, and the whole thing just couldn't have been any easier. And so right out of the gate, again, it's just super simple to get things set up. And I think when you're talking about deploying this across a fleet of infrastructure, that makes a very big difference. So obviously we had a simple test environment, spun up some systems and had the agent installed on this. So I had, and I tried to give at least a breadth of OSs here, right? So we had a little Windows flavor, Mac, Linux stuff, but again, minutes. And then the whole thing was brought into there, and next thing you know, you're in the console and you've got systems. Now, obviously, the first thing that tends to happen is sort of an assimilation of data from those systems. Just like you would expect for any sort of systems management scenarios like this, there has to be some inventorying and all those things being brought in. And that, that takes more than a minute, but certainly not very long. So I didn't have long to wait before all of the various types of packages and the sort of, call it the state of the system in each of those cases was available to me within the console. And as I mentioned, the ease of use was really a big deal here. So right on the sort of main console screen, you have full visibility into sort of the big picture. In other words, what's the state of the environment? And I didn't have a very big environment, so it's not as though I was looking at hundreds or thousands of systems in some sort of percentage-based reporting factor. But I think that would be a really useful, sort of first stage of visibility for anybody that just wanted to get a sense of, hey, what does my environment look like at a glance? Calling it compliant. And compliant, by the way, is entirely up to you. So you get to dictate what compliant means with regards to things like patching and config state. In my case, it was, hey, I just want all my stuff completely patched, up to date with any available packages. I tried to keep it as simple as I possibly could, at least, out of the get-go. But if you'll notice, you can also break this down into a couple other different categories, which makes sense for day-to-day systems management. For any of you that are in the IT ops realm, you're going to have exceptions. You're going to have those manual approval situations where you don't just automatically apply patches, for example, because you have, maybe a legacy system that has to be maintained for some period of time, or you're in an OT environment where, you have all sorts of weird things running and nothing gets done automatically, right? It's all manual and very careful updates, and those can be flagged here. So at any given moment, as an IT ops person or a security person or an auditor or whoever is going to be gaining access, I can come in and at a glance say, okay, I've got X number of manual approval scenarios. I've got scheduled updates that are planned and coming down the pipe. I've got a couple things that look like they need attention. That's probably more for the IT ops folks. We need to probably go check on something, or again, for the security folks that might need to go check on the state of something that was supposed to be patched and didn't get a patch pushed to it or something else. And then you've got exclusions, and exclusions are part of life. So to me, those are four easily, sort of valuable categories to make sure that I'm apprised of right out of the get-go. And so the initial dashboard was really very simple and intuitive to figure out what was going on. Awesome. Again, simple is good. I don't like cluttered dashboards, and that is exactly what we did not get. We did not get any clutter. So we also saw in the devices dashboard a bunch of different queries. Again, in a very small test environment like we had set up for this review, I'm not going across a wide swath of different systems, which most organizations have. So if you're a large enterprise, not only are you going to have a variety of different operating platforms in use, but you're going to have different versions of those. And it's not at all uncommon for organizations today to have a pretty big mix of various Linux implementations. You got a handful of Macs. Macs are actually becoming much more popular in the enterprise these days. We know this. You've probably got a number of different Windows versions, especially things like servers. And I think being able to easily go in and look for whatever type of system I wanted, whether it's operating system centric whether it's a specific naming convention that we've assigned. You can also assign tags or metadata labels to systems and then simply go query, which of course makes sense if you're trying to create your own logical grouping mechanisms for systems, which we do and we need to. I can go look across any and all of those. I can actually go look for things that are missing. So, hey, just show me right now all the systems in the environment that are missing patches that have this severity level and higher, for example. So, hey, anything that's a high level criticality or more, show me all of those systems right now, which to me makes it simple to keep up with what's going on, especially in a fast moving environment where things get missed, right? So I can go look by CVE ID, pretty much any type of categorical area you can imagine. You've got a way to go filter for this and look across your infrastructure. And especially for large environments where you need to do something like that at scale, I mean, this just makes all the sense in the world. So here's my here's my admittedly small little test environment. So here's my my 3 systems are hanging out. But that's okay, because you can see what you need to see in the systems here. And as I said, you can go look for things that are disconnected. You can go look for any systems that aren't reporting back in. So that's important too. If, for instance, you have something that's gone wrong with an agent, or there's been some sort of a conflict on the system, or even if the system has just fallen on its face on its own right for other reasons, it's not going to be reporting. You need to know that. And that might tell you, hey, we've got an issue over here. There might be something going on, and you can go and flag that. So you have a very, very simple and quick way to go into the environment, see exactly what it is that you need to see. And this is that sort of initial stage dashboard. So I think for IT ops folks, you'd probably end up spending some reasonable amount of time pulling together groups and looking for specific groups of systems that either met or didn't meet a particular condition, but looking for that, very, very simple. So this is where it starts. And of course, as you can imagine, you can drill in and get a heck of a lot more detail about any and all of the systems very, very quickly. So once you've found systems that you're looking for, so again, I want to know all systems of type X or that are missing this patch or what have you, then you can go start drilling down in. And so, don't try to squint too hard at my screenshots here, but anything you want to know, you can pretty much know. So as I said, it takes a little bit of time for all of the sort of like packages and installed software components and things to sort of just be brought into the inventory. But once that's there, these things tend to stay up to date really, really well. And that's what I found, because I deliberately made changes throughout the course of the test scenario to see how quickly they got picked up. And the answer is pretty fast. All right, so I didn't measure, I didn't have a stopwatch, but they were quick. So as you can see here, I've got a group that I've defined. And of course, again, it's an admittedly simple group for this test scenario, but I've got my SANS test group. You can assign different tags to systems. So in this case, my Linux server, I spun up and said, okay, this is automatically brought in as a recently added. So that's a pretty easy one. But you can do custom tagging and assignment of different metadata that sort of makes sense for your own organization. You can see the amount of memory and CPU and all that kind of stuff. So you've got more like the system level resources available to you, and so on. So you can see pretty much like a snapshot of the system. You can see its network information and all that fun stuff. But of course, where you'll really want to go is down even a level further than that, because really just getting the basic details about systems, okay, that's fine. But I'm probably going to want to get down into the level of things like packages and patches and things that are more security centric. And that's exactly where, of course, we went during this review. So we wanted to make sure we could see everything we needed to see, but you'll even note up in the right-hand corner, there's a little icon there that says scan device. So you can initiate a manual scan at any time if you want to do your own updates, right, just to go to see what's going on. But this tends to happen pretty automatically in the background, and that's all configurable, incidentally, too. So I went down into the software, of course, to see what kinds of things were picked up. And like I said, it takes a minute to sort of have this all assimilated and brought in. But once you've got this, of course, it's a query engine. And that's really the thing. It's a big query engine that you can immediately go in and look for. And just like I had mentioned a moment ago, when it came to the device side of things, I found it extraordinarily simple to just go in and basically search for anything I wanted to. And it's a smart filter, right? So the search bar there is fairly intuitive. You can just put in a keyword or pretty much anything, and it'll bring that stuff right back to you. So you can look for operating systems, of course, and query across those. I can look for things like missing patches here as well. I can look for CVEs. And I think the CVEs are a big deal here, in particular, because of the enormous range of software packages that organizations tend to have in place. And if I can look across the entire swath of my infrastructure in one place and say, okay, I know that, there's folks out there running, crummy versions of Java, or, somebody's had the audacity to install things from Adobe that don't pass muster, or whatever it is, right? We could, all the various browsers and things. I mean, there's just a million pieces of software, and there's bugs constantly being released. The worst thing in the world, and by the way, let me just take a step back, because I'll even bring in a little bit of context. And so some of you may be familiar with the CIS critical controls framework, which many, many, many years ago started life as something called the SANS Top 20, right? And this isn't a big history lesson, but it's sort of a funny anecdote from my own experience. I mean, we started the SANS Top 20 program back in like the mid 2000s. That's ancient history, I know, but back all the way back in the day. And look, you get a bunch of SANS instructors together, there is quite literally zero chance that we're all going to agree on everything. It just isn't going to happen. But in the folks that put together the SANS Top 20, we actually did agree on something. And that something was the #1 and #2 priorities for the SANS Top 20, which, by the way, now that this is the CIS critical controls, are still the #1 and #2 priority. And that is inventory of systems and inventory of software. And the reason those have always been the top 2 priorities is because it's hard. It's a hard thing to get your arms around. It's a hard thing for organizations to keep up with. And having a means to not only know what you have running in your environment, but what software is running on those systems, to me is an enormously powerful capability. So having a very simple search function that allows me to go dig across everything I've got running and see what I need to see, really, really awesome. And I definitely sort of appreciated what that could mean for organizations all over the place. So definitely a very easy platform to use. Here's just a quick example. I went in and said, hey, let me just go look for, versions of OpenSSL that are out there. I probably don't need to tell anybody that is attending here today that OpenSSL has had some issues over the years. And so I just was curious. I'm like, what do I have running out there? What versions are out there? And sure enough, here we go. I can see all these various types of, OpenSSL versions, the number of days these things have been out there and exposed, whether they're installed in my environment. It's very easy to see where packages are. And what that does is it gives you priorities, right? As an organization that's looking to try to shore up those vulnerable packages and minimize threat surface and all that fun stuff, having that capability to be able to quickly say, all right, I need to know where is this in my environment, if it's even there. Those are systems that I need to flag for patching, if possible, as soon as possible. So, you get it. It's all about criticality. It's all about prioritization, and where you can, trying to make sure that, you get those types of things fixed up. So it's all about hygiene. I look at this as system hygiene. And for a number of years now, we've been, sort of talking about getting back to the basics, the core foundational elements of infrastructure security. And that's squarely where we are right here. So I've got a couple different categories for going in, and the management dashboard and the manage section of the dashboard, I should say, for going in and implementing some of these different hygiene capabilities. The first is policy management. And this is really where you'll spend some time as an organization, because it's where you customize things. Not everybody's going to have the same needs. Not everybody's going to have the same stance or approach. And certainly even in a mixed environment, you're going to have different policies for different systems and different groups of systems. And so you'll necessarily need to go in and do a bit of the tuning here to decide, hey, what is the desired security posture for systems X, Y, and Z across the infrastructure? So you go in, start managing some of those policies. And there are a variety of policies, sort of out of the gate that you can just jump in and start making use of. So you're not completely on your own from scratch, but you can customize these as much as you want to. So patching policies, for example, I mean, do you want to just go, hit all the missing patches? Is it only specific patches? Do I want to keep patching focused on particular levels of severity? And truthfully, let me just pause there, because one of the things I've seen, I won't say as a wholesale trend, because I don't know that it is. One of the things that I would say I have seen as a gradual shift that's probably going to accelerate, in the very near future, is some degree of automated patching, right? More so than we've ever seen in the past. And even though I just said, hey, look, you got to do your testing, and of course you do, especially for some types of systems, maybe it's just endpoints, end user endpoints. Hey, we're patching automatically. We'll take the risk because it's better to go on ahead and get those patches deployed. You won't necessarily do that for things like critical server infrastructure, but hey, look, I've got all my Windows 10 patches, they're going out, right? We'll do a little testing, whatever, but saying, hey, look, we're going to patch all issues of severity X. No questions asked. Those things get patched in an automated way. That's how you can create a policy and then simply schedule that and have it in a completely automated fashion in your environment. You've got more advanced patching controls. So really, really granular controls around, do you notify users? Do you reboot? Do you, wait to reboot? Is there, are there some specific parameters or conditions that have to be in place during this patch cycle? So it's not a, sort of one size fits all approach by any means. There's a lot of flexibility in how those patching policies can not only be created, but then of course implemented as well, where exclusions can be put into place. Again, back to that first dashboard we saw, manual approval requirements for certain types of critical infrastructure. Yeah, you probably need to have somebody sign off on it, because you don't want to take the chance that you're going to have things breaking. And so you get to configure patches, times and dates, and all those other parameters. And it was very simple, right? Again, this is a very basic example that just shows you parts of this. So you can't even see the full screen of all the things that were there. But I found that creating a patching policy was, minutes. I mean, it was just an incredibly simple process. And so back to my comment earlier about the ease of use of the platform, it's definitely still holding here. And nobody wants a complicated policy that they can't even really discern or tell what it is they're creating. And that was absolutely not the case. So again, I created a patch, apply all patches, which is sort of a cop out. That's an easy one, but it got a sense for the policy, when I wanted to apply it, and so forth. So here's another example of just patching critical. I just want to apply all the critical patches. And so here you'll note up in the top, I'm going to assign it by severity. So let's just go out and find all the patches of a particular severity and apply those. And so in this case, you'll note down at the bottom, so again, it's probably kind of small for everybody to try to see there, but it says package targeting. So sure, yeah, I want critical and I want high. That's it. So obviously you could just, extrapolate this as much as you want to, but I know that those, and so let's say, for example, these are my exposed systems in the DMZ, right? So they're sitting on the internet. There's an internet facing factor going on here. Yeah, I'm not going to hesitate. I can't have any critical patches sitting exposed directly to the internet, because there's people constantly targeting the systems. So yeah, it was very, very simple to set this up and then actually apply it. Now, the software policies, the ease of use was there as well, but this, of course, is a second type of policy that was all about, making sure we have particular versions of things in place. And where I've actually found a lot of this in, as sort of a focal area, especially for organizations that now have a very mixed workforce, people working from home, people working in the office, and also people that increasingly are using some of their own equipment. And organizations found themselves sort of thrust into that position back when the pandemic began in 2020. I actually had clients that did not have enough systems for everybody, people that only came to the office to work. I know, crazy talk, right? But people that would actually show up at work every day, they had a system, under their desk or whatever, and then they went home and so forth and so on. Well, didn't have a choice anymore. So people had to start using their own laptops. And organizations had to scramble a bit to put some base minimum requirements in place with regard to security practices and controls. And it's things like browser versions, right? Let's just make sure at a minimum, particularly when people are using many more cloud-based services, I got to try to protect those end users, irrespective of whether it's our systems, their systems, let's just make sure that we have certain requirements for browsers and that they're up to date with regard to patches and things like that. Okay, I mean, that's a starting point. It's not enough, you know that, and I know that, but looking at things like that and saying, hey, I need to put that in place. And then, oh, by the way, if you're going to be accessing the infrastructure, like it or not, everybody's got to have some sort of endpoint security agent in place. And so here's the standards. Let's make sure that's in place, the browser's up to date, and then we go from there. But creating required software policies, what are your requirements? What's the standard set of software packages that are needed and expected for all of the systems in your environment? And of course, what we've got with this policy is a means to essentially go out and put that in place. I can put that level of enforcement in place across my entire infrastructure, whether it's Windows, whether it's Macs, whether it's Linux systems. And the cool thing is, not only can you put that into place, but you can keep it that way. And that's the other nice thing, is you quite literally, by putting this type of platform in your environment, set up a continuous monitoring infrastructure right at the same time. And so you can keep track of it all. And that's going back to the whole discussion around having an inventory and knowing what it looks like at any given time, point in time. It's been a running joke in the security community for years that nobody really knows the entire inventory of what they've got running across their infrastructure. But it's a sad joke, my friends. It's a sad one. And so we should really be looking to try to make that no longer a joke. So again, super simple to set this up. So here's where things got even better for me. So, at this point you're saying like, all right, cool, Dave, sounds like you had a lot of fun patching and locking down software packages, right? And I am one of those people that readily enjoys patching and software packages. I have no problem telling you that, but they have something called a worklet. So the Automox worklet is sort of this, well, I look at it, it's a scripting engine, right? PowerShell or sort of like, Linux or Mac shell syntax, but you can do anything. I mean, and I think that's an exaggeration, because anything that you could do at a command line or that you could script out on a platform, you can create an automation mechanism through Automox to do exactly those same things. And so you can pick and choose whatever it is, right? I can flip on a firewall. I mean, imagine any configuration that you want to do, you can do. I can do upgrades, I can install things, I can uninstall things. Think of a simple example where you're trying to do an automated deployment of something like a host certificate for validating somebody's authentication. It sounds like something that should be simple, but speaking from my own experience, isn't. So, okay, it is now. You can actually write a script that just does it and puts that in place across all of the various types of your infrastructure in one place. So just imagine tuning and tweaking and configuring any and all of your platforms. What worklets facilitate is exactly that, but automated and at scale. And as with many of the elements of Automox, you're not starting from scratch. So there's a whole catalog of these things that were available. And I sort of explored, I played around with a few of these, but there's a lot of them, right? And they're specific to different operating systems and such, of course. But you can do OS upgrades, you can do customized configurations. I mean, you name it, you can pretty much do it. And the team has created a bunch of these. And there's sort of an active community creating these things and sharing them too, which I always like. And it's always nice to know that people are out there creating stuff and sharing them as well, just to save everybody time. I think that's also really, really beneficial. So yeah, I actually didn't have enough time to fully explore all of the varied types of worklets. But as I said, a lot, right? There's a whole bunch of them out there, and there's more being added all the time. So there you go. Moving along from there, another piece of Automox that I thought was pretty cool was what are called Automox Tasks, which means that you can create automation that's triggered based on something. So if X, then Y, right, is the way I think about this. So you've gotten some sort of an alert or some sort of a reporting mechanism feeding back in. And Automox has a number of different relationships with other third parties and so forth. Again, which I of course didn't have the opportunity to fully explore to that extent. But look, I would imagine all of you out there right now have a number of different technologies. You have EDR tools that are in place. You have anti-malware tools that are in place. You have things that hopefully are performing critical security functions, and then feeding some of that stuff back into you. Well, what's cool is you can actually upload things like a CSV, as you see right here, to create tasks coming from some of those providers. And so you're saying, okay, basically here, what I'm doing is I'm sort of aligning events and aligning specific things that are reporting and alerting in the environment with desired automation sequences thereafter. That's going to differ for everybody. So for some folks, you're going to want to do automated remediation. For some, you might be tying into things like SOAR or orchestration models, where you're simply looking to feed sort of the next stage of alerting or opening tickets, or who knows what it might look like. This could tie into threat hunting. This could easily tie into your forensics and response practices and processes. So many different opportunities to do things here. And again, I think this is a really cool and innovative way to start tying together your technology stacks and having more of that automated sort of procedures in place. So lots of cool benefits. As I said, I was really pretty bullish after digging in and seeing, just number one, the capability sets, but also sort of beyond just IT ops. Yeah, automated software deployments to the level of automation that you want. Automation tasks, really simple integration. I did not go, fully explore all the APIs and SDKs and things that are offered by Automox, but they're there. And trust me, that sort of partner level of integration is another big one. But beyond just the IT ops side of things, you've also got a lot of different cool reports that you can generate too. And that goes beyond just the IT ops reports. So the IT ops folks, of course, you're going to be looking for things like patches. You're going to be looking for configuration state, and you're going to want to build that on some cadence over time. But security folks have a lot to like here too. You've got activity logs on, what's been going on in the environment, changes and things that are being made. So the way I always start thinking about stuff like that, because on the surface you might say, this is an IT automation and management infrastructure type of service, which indeed it is. But I like to know what my desired state is at any given time and whether or not it's changing and whether those changes were authorized or not. So sure, yeah, if you're a DevOps environment where everything's moving at light speed and changes are happening every 4 seconds, it's a little bit of a different scenario for obvious reasons. But if I've got that location in my environment where all of my HIPAA data is, or the air quotes here, crown jewels, I at least want to know that, number one, the environment isn't in a state of chaos where things could break and just be problematic. But I also want to know if any major changes are made to, say, privileged identities that have access to the environment, or whether or not there's some fundamental functional change that could definitively impact security posture or just operational continuity. I want to know those things, and I want to be able to at least triage that they've been approved and discussed before that stuff happens. I can do that, right? You can build that sort of continuous monitoring cadence of critical assets and parts of the environment. But beyond that, of course, it's things like patching. It's looking at all of these different types of reports that numerous groups have good reason to want to get access to. You can also do exports of data. And so the data extracts reports can basically compile a bunch of things and bundle that together. I didn't have an opportunity to explore that too much, but it looks pretty cool. And I could certainly see why that would be very applicable in a larger environment. You would want to be able to sort of bundle some of that data out. Here's a quick example of some of the device overview reporting. And again, you can't see all of it, just I took one sort of snippet of this, but simple, clean, easy to see what you need to see. I didn't have to wade through 1,000 lines of text to sort of get the core ideas out of what the report was telling me, right? Which devices are in which state. And then of course you can, sort of build on that and dig down too. So pretty cool, really enjoyed it. Final thoughts, just wrapping up and sort of giving you my feedback. I think you can probably tell, I dug it, right? I actually really liked the Automox platform. It was a fun review, truthfully. I didn't feel like I was banging my head on the desk to A, get started, but B, get a lot done. So if I was an already strapped or operationally constrained team that was running pretty lean, I think this would be exactly the type of solution that would help me move in a positive direction and do it very, very quickly and efficiently, right? There was not a lot of juggling of stuff. Agent deployment was simple. Management and monitoring was simple. Policy creation was, super, super easy. And then you get the worklets, which have ties into pretty much anything you can imagine automating. Not only configuration, but even collection of evidence, threat hunting, you name it. There's just tons of cool ways that this platform, I think, could easily benefit any organization out there. So really enjoyed it. And with that, I'm actually going to hand things off to the Automox team. So take it away, folks.
Hey, thank you so much, Dave. I think you got a really good intro into like what the platform is and how it works. So to go in here, I'm going to start and then David is going to take over. But we're going to talk about a couple of examples of how you could actually use the Automox product in your organization. So as we said earlier, my name is Jessica Onorati, and I'm the team lead of organizational security. Internally at Automox, we use our own product in order to automate many security tasks, as well as IT tasks. David will be going into how our IT team uses that in a couple of minutes here. But we wanted to bring you a couple of examples of how you could really use this and how we're using it. So the first thing that I'm going to kind of bring to light here is, automating security in our IR made easy kind of situation. So right now within Automox, we are using Automox to automate some of our IR tasks. When investigating an incident, the last thing you want to be doing is spending time trying to figure out what you need to collect and who's collecting it and how. So we're utilizing Automox in order to automatically do a lot of our IR and evidence gathering tasks. We can set evidence gathering, isolation, or even remediation tasks to run on demand or as a workflow utilizing Automox's accessible API or UI. So as an example, we're going to talk about our macOS IR evidence gathering. So this is a worklet that you can find in the worklet catalog that we provide for you. So it's out of the box, ready to go. This was written by a member of my team, Marina Leong. So this one, what it will do for you is it will go in and automatically collect macOS IR evidence that you might want from a macOS device or endpoint if there's a suspicious activity. So without Automox, what this might look like is you receive an alert within your SOC, depending on what your response times look like. You're probably looking at around a 30-minute escalation period before someone's actually eyes on looking at that task. The SOC agent is then manually assessing the alert and determining what evidence they need. Hopefully you have a run book ready to go that they can pull up. But again, this is a manual effort where a SOC agent is usually an entry-level security person. So they'll need to go to the run book, read through what they need to collect, get onto the endpoint using a, any kind of tooling if applicable, or by contacting the end user in order to gain control of that endpoint. They'll have to manually run through that run book and gather all the evidence that they require, and then they'll have to manually export all that found evidence. When we run through this process as like a test scenario internally, what we're seeing is our start of investigation or analysis is about 2 to 4 hours after the alert happens. So that's a lot of time where a threat actor could be moving or gaining control or compromising systems, but we don't want to give them time, especially when there's repeatable tasks that we can automate. So the macOS IR evidence gathering worklet, what it's going to do for you on demand is it could reduce your timeline for the beginning of your investigation and analysis from an hour to 0 hours. So you can run it on demand where the SOC receives an alert. And then instead of going to a manual run book and running through, they could just run the worklet from the Automox console and then pull that information off and start their analysis. So given the time to log into the Automox console, actually responding to the alert, we're looking at less than an hour probably in order to start that investigation. Or they can do it as a workflow, utilizing any kind of like EDR tools or a scripting tool that you might have in your system. This is how we do it internally at Automox. So what that workflow might look like is the SOC receives an alert. the workflow triggers based off of the kind of alert and what it needs to interact with. So via our IR system, our automation server, internally, we're using an EDR. It contacts Automox via the API, runs the worklet on the endpoint, and then returns that information back to the analyst in order to start their investigation. So by the time the SOC analyst is looking at the alert, by the time they've actually pulled up the ticket, there's probably already information in there about the processes running on the machine, what kinds of persistence mechanisms might be in there, all those kinds of things, all that log gathering, it's all going to do it for you and just present it to the SOC analyst right at that initial get-go. So it saves a lot of critical response time. And with that, I'm going to show you guys quickly what that looks like in our console. Okay. So you guys should all be looking at the Automox console now. You'll see that right now I have the worklet pulled up right from our worklet catalog. This is what it would look like to you as an end user if you were going to go ahead and try to configure this worklet for yourself. So this is available right out of the box in our worklet catalog. Our evaluation code here is really simple. It's just looking essentially if the directory for IR collection already exists, signifying that this is already run. And if it doesn't, then it's going to go ahead and run this. As a user, there's not much that you'll have to change here. There's a lot of really cool stuff in here that Marina wrote in as far as collection. It's going to give you basically anything that you might want as someone who's responding to an incident about that endpoint at that time. So it's going to give you logs, it's going to give you all of the browser logs, it's going to give you running processes, any kind of persistence mechanisms that it senses, basically anything that you would need, like ports, any kind of like network calls, interesting environment variables. I mean, she really went above and beyond here. And also, if there's additional things that you want to add to your investigation, you can always add those to pull them into the same thing. But out of the box, this is going to give you a lot of really useful information to start your investigation. So if we wanted to use this internally as the worklet, we won't go into the workflow, how that would work with your EDR, because that's going to be very specific based off of your system that you have internally at your organization. But within our worklet, it's very easy. It's already set to macOS. You just have to associate it to a group or an individual device to run it. You can run this on a schedule if you needed to for some reason, like maybe you've had an ongoing investigation with like a suspicious user that you wanted to see what they were doing on a regular basis. Or you can run it on demand, which is probably the most likely use case for this. But it's really easy as far as setting it up. All you have to do is find it in the catalog and then assign a device and go ahead and run it on demand. And then if you were using it in the workflow scenario, you would go ahead and just have the API call to utilize this worklet. So it's really, really easy. Right out of the box, works without really any adjustment. So this could be really, really helpful day one to your security team with Automox. And then with that, we'll get back into the slides. Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's where I take it from here, kind of piggybacking off of you, or?
Yeah, just really quick, I just wanted to show an example of the output of that. So if you guys were to use this IR script, right out of the box, these are the things that you could expect to get from that. So it'll show you all of your browser extensions, your system logs, your daemons in use, your keychain access, logged in users, a network snapshot. So really just a lot of really cool point in time information that you can utilize to start your investigation. And with that, I will pass it off to my colleague, David, so he can tell you about how ITOps uses our tool internally.
Yeah, sorry for jumping in early.
No, you're good.
I'm David Van Heerden. I'm the IT operations manager here at Automox. And when I first joined, and getting familiar with the product and how it was used here. I mean, Jessica was already part of the team and had a very well built and mature security program. So what was kind of fun for us was to then kind of see how we could use the product in a more advanced way. And that's exactly what Jess sort of alluded to earlier, which was the Automox API and triggering these kinds of worklets on demand. And the one part that really became interesting to me as an IT operations person is delivering a higher level of customer service, obviously to our internal customers here at Automox. And so with that, one of the very common scenarios we get into is where the user submits a trouble ticket saying, this isn't working, please help. Or they just need a common thing done for them that they're used to needing done. And for best example for that, which I've got on the next slide here, is the printer problem, which I think we can all suffer together with dealing every day. Almost multiple times a day, we have to deal with printer problems. I think it's categorically the most common issue a help desk has to handle. So if we can move on to the next slide, I can kind of talk through the scenario and the time saving that is available with Automox. So even in an ideal world where you have the Automox product, a average resolution time for a typical printer problem can take up to 20 hours. This is pulled out of industry data from a Fresh Service Report of 2022, where they were mainly pointing out that the time to respond to a ticket where someone says, hey, my printer isn't working, submits a ticket, and that ticket sits in the queue on average for about 10 hours. And then once that ticket is picked up by an agent, that agent can then go into the machine via remote connection and perform whatever commands they need to, or manual checkboxes and uninstallation, reinstallation of the driver. And by the time they schedule that moment of time with the end user, get onto that Zoom call or get onto that remote session, the average resolution time for this kind of problem can be up to 20 hours. And that's all with the coordinating of time and disruption of each other's time to get this kind of thing resolved. But then looking at this worklets on demand, as we've labeled it, use case for Automox, you can use a ticketing system, and as Jess has it with their IDR system, is that you can use the Automox API to execute those scripts at the click of a button by the end user. There's a lot of very powerful use cases for this sort of thing in a lot of secured environments. Your end users might not have the admin privileges to follow a simple instruction to open command prompt and run a script, or click on a file and run as admin in order to do something that you've automated. And so we are able, through the Automox platform, are able to deliver a full solution, administrative, powerful solution to the end user via our ticketing system and our API. And as this demonstrates, it can be closing that time to resolution loop down to 0 hours. As soon as they submit that ticket, the Automox API will trigger the worklet on their device, and that script will run and resolve that common case issue for them. And I do have a demo prepared just to kind of show you what that looks like for an end user. This is fairly specific to our environment, as we are utilizing Fresh Service internally. But this can be accomplished with majority of the ticketing systems out there that have workflow automations, the ability to trigger webhooks, as well as access some sort of inventory pairing to your user. Things like Zapier, Workato support this as well. And so this is a shameless plug for the blog post that we have about this. I have a recording of this demo that I'm going to speed run through here, and some detailed instructions on how to build this in your environment. Try to keep it simple so you can apply it to any of your ticketing systems that you have. But for the end user, in this example here, we don't really have printers. We're a fully remote company, so not a lot of folks have a printer that needs a driver removed or installed. But we do have a proxy firewall tool called Netscope, and that's where often we need to troubleshoot and really get a sense that, is it really the firewall's fault that something isn't working? And that requires us to gather some logs from the end user's device. And what we like to do in preparation for it is just have the logs ready to go and extracted off of the device into a Google Drive folder for us. And so we'll ask our users just to go and click this button. This could also be triggered automatically if they ever go to submit a ticket and they say, I'm having Netscope issues, I think, or I'm having a network problem. we can automatically gather these logs in the background and pull them off of their device. But for the end user, it's as simple as going to the service request portal, saying, okay, I need the logs gathered on my desktop, and they hit place request. And my blog goes into a bit of finer detail on this one. This gives a little behind the scenes view of what the agencies in the ticketing system. This is where we see that the automation was executed and the API call was hit. And I'm not really going to show you all the fancy details. I do have a more smoother demonstration inside of the blog post there. But for the end user, it's as simple as that. They click the button and the action is performed for them. And again, the sky's really the limit on what you guys can automate for your end users. One example that I like to sort of seed as an inspiration is that for myself as an end user, I might be able to say, okay, I'm joining this particular marketing team, and I would like to have a host of the marketing team software pieces. So they use the Adobe suite plus additional cloud application. I would be able to click the button to say, give me this package, and then it can go and install a whole suite of applications, make modifications to my system to give me access to a specific network storage within the office. And there's a whole host of things that can be driven by the Automox platform and available to the end user at the click of a button. And I'll send it back to you.
All right, thanks for that great presentation. Let me just go ahead and get over to the next slide there. All right, as I said, thanks for that great presentation. We do have some questions ready for the Q&A. However, if anyone has a question for our presenters, please enter it into the questions window now. Let's see, this first one says, our major challenge when we're patching is the ability to restore from a malfunctioning patch. How can your solution handle it? Can you integrate with VMware for snapshots or Veeam for similar solutions, or you have an internal process to guarantee that? Thanks. And if you need me to repeat that, or if you want to look at that in the Q&A window, just go ahead.
Yeah, it's answering a question with more questions, I think, because it is a fairly complex one. But I would be able to suggest that with the worklets that can be drafted and created, you can standardize your source of imaging and your golden image or the last healthy state of an asset. And so with that creation of a worklet and having that source of your golden image or your ideal state for a device, if there ever is a failed patch, you can just run that worklet afterwards or that policy afterwards to bring it back to its valid state. But we do not have a undo or revert patch function inside of the app.
All right, thank you. This next one says, any functionality around EOL OSSs?
Could I get the asker to expand on that? Are they asking if we support end-of-life OSs or if we could upgrade OSs? I just want to make sure I understand the question.
All right, we'll give Michael a moment here to clarify.
Sure.
In the meantime, I'd like everyone to know that a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And probably now would be a good time I'm going to put a link in. Whoop, hang on, I clicked on the wrong thing here. For a link to the trial. Let me put that in the chat window. Hang on, I didn't copy and paste, so give me a minute.
It did sort of ninja answer a question earlier in the session from Michael,
okay.
Where he asked if is OS or OS only or third-party patching as well. I did answer that one directly where, yeah, we do support third-party patching. And I think another cool tidbit is that you can upload your own applications that you want to mark as required and deploy and manage yourself. So I know that that's extremely valuable for a lot of internal or very vendor-specific applications in your environment. Point of sales.
All right, thanks. I just put a blog link in the window for everyone, and I want to put in, there's one more to your trial. I have to click on it and then copy and paste it. So just give me one moment here to get that in there. So this one is for the free trial. I don't know if either of you want to speak to that or just have it in there is good enough. All right, so that's all the questions.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Jessica.
Oh no, I just didn't know if Amy wanted to bump the free trial or not. But yeah, just since Michael, I'm gonna kind of guess what you wanted. I'm gonna just give a couple of points on the ELL since we didn't get that clarification there. I just wanted to make sure that your question was answered. So there are some end of life OSs that we support as far as patch management. The caveat to that is they have to be able to support TLS 1.2 in order to communicate. So if they're an OS that does not support 1.2, then they aren't going to work with the platform. That being said, as long as that is the case, you can manage end of life OSs. That's one of the benefits of Automox is like even beyond that patch window, if you want to add like configuration controls, compensating controls to your end of life OSs, you can do that with Automox. And you can also obviously do OS upgrades with the platform as well. So hopefully that answered your question.
All right, great. Thank you both so much for the Q&As here, and Dave Shackleford, of course, for the great presentation, and to Automox for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.